Dr. Jeffrey Long is a medical doctor specializing in the practice of radiation oncology. As a specialist, Jeff founded NDERF in 1998. He wanted to know if NDEs were real by directly asking the NDEers themselves, and the answer is a resounding yes. As a result of his research, he's the author of the New York Times bestseller, Evidence of the Afterlife, The Science of Near-Death Experiences. He also wrote God in the Afterlife, the groundbreaking new evidence for God and near-death experience. As a leading NDE researcher and a medical doctor, Jeff has appeared on national media, including NBC Today, ABC with Peter Jennings, The Dr. Oz Show, History Channel, Learning Channel, Oprah, National Geographic, and on and on and on. Here, we talk about a range of topics related to NDEs, UFOs, and consciousness. The conversation shed light on the complex and fascinating relationship between the humans and the phenomenon, and the importance of ongoing research and investigation. We highlighted the significance of NDEs and encounters with otherworldly beings and the potential for these experiences to unify people across cultures and beliefs. Dr. Long is awesome. I'm so happy to have met him and have learned more about his amazing research. You got a movie coming out, right?
Yeah.
That's called, what's it called again? It's called
After Death. Yeah.
After Death, and that's going to be like in theaters. Is that just like
widespread theater release. This is a major studio release. It's a near-death experience themed movie. Well, in fact, that's all it is. So they have a bunch of people that had near-death experiences, and I'm the one of several experts that they had talk about near-death experience. So
That's
I guess
amazing.
I would say, a lot going on here.
Yeah. And you got another one that's coming out.
I'll when I show up in early November, I'll probably get more details on that. But often the big people don't want to get scooped and they're reluctant to details. But that's gonna be kind of fun. They're flying Jody and I into Buffalo.
Oh, cool.
The interview, and they gave us an extra day. We'll bum around Niagara Falls, so that's gonna be we got a lot of irons in the fire. So exciting time. So you asked, surprise,
it's been massively. I mean, June, you and I were hanging out by the pool at Contact in the desert, and now I mean, it's just literally when that conference ended is when Dave Grush came out. It was
it started all
that day, right?
Absolutely. What's been up with you these days? You drive. I love that Jeepster. That's really cool.
Thank you very much.
I don't know where you find one of those things. I mean, that would have to not be common.
They're super rare. Yeah. So, I live real close to Toledo, Ohio, and they built them in Toledo, Ohio from 1948 to 1950. And they only built like 14,000 of them total. Wow. And they built them on like the Jeep frame. What their thought process was, from all the things I read, was that the guys that were in World War II were used to driving Jeeps, and they thought that they would rebrand it in a way, Willys, to make it a convertible, still kind of basic, the same kind of, feel and everything, but make it a convertible, make it fun. And the problem is they underpowered it. Like the motor, the original motors in them were like 60 horse. So you could barely get it at 60 miles an hour. So everybody was like, everybody's like, no way. Like there's nothing I want to drive.
It's a good thing they build them in a relatively flat area of the country. That wouldn't work.
You're right. You couldn't even
halfway up the mountain. So good.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, we a club started. So Zenobia Shrine. So I'm a Shriner. So the Jeepsters Club started, I think, in the 60s, and at one time there was like 75 guys. So because they were built here, there was a lot of people that had them, and then obviously the guys that were the Shriners that were getting older, retired, or couldn't drive anymore, they would just sell them to another guy in the Shrine, and the club could go on. But unfortunately, we went from 75. Now we're down to 10, actually 11 running cars. We're trying to keep it going. And it's really hard to find parts. It's really hard to find them.
I was going to say, I don't know. My heart goes out to you. You're driving a parade and you hear that clunk. And
it's happened.
Oh my God, what do you do? So that's really wild. Well, that's good. And hats off for working with the Shriners, a very important organization. That's fantastic.
Thank you. I don't know if you've had any interactions with the Shrine Hospitals for Children at all, but I mean, amazing organization, right?
Yeah, they actually, I haven't done pediatric radiation oncology for over 10 years, but they had a lot of Shriner support. That was when I was in Tacoma, and we were taking care of the kids with cancer pretty much everywhere south of Seattle. We quite a bit of that, and of course, the Shriners and everybody else. I mean, the support for kids with cancer is just amazing. I wish they had that.
I know. You're right. I mean, it makes me feel good that I'm doing something fun and I'm helping kids out, and like it's great. The amount of medical research they do is just astounding.
Yeah, and that's. Oh, by the way, because of
Yeah.
the research that you support, when I started my residency about 37 years ago, they had maybe 50 to 60% of kids would be cured with cancer. Now it's up to about 80%.
Wow.
That's directly due to research, directly due to much more effective treatment in these kids and them having the
Wow.
types of cancer that lend themselves to cure much more so than adults. So yeah, I can tell you right now, you've made a huge, you and your everyone raising funds have made a huge difference. That's a lot of kids every year saved, and worldwide too. What we
That's
learned in
amazing.
America from that research goes all over the world. So yeah, that's a big deal.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. That's great to hear. It's awesome to hear the impact, at least it's, we try, we hand a check over every year, we just literally, but it's interesting to hear that actually, and then, speaking to some of the kids that have gone through, the treatments, it's just amazing, the journeys they've had and the support. So it's been awesome. And yeah, I mean, hats off to you too, for being an oncologist. I mean, I don't know how you do that. I mean, that's just rough, right? I mean, it's gotta be.
Yes, it's rough. Pediatric radiation oncology takes about 4 times the time that it takes for an adult, because there's just so many things that you have to think about, and details and planning. And where I was at, the staff's in an uproar and says, "Oh, Dr. Long, it's a cute kid. Well, we have to, that makes us so sad." And you have to just deal with that. But anyway, it was, it's got to be done. It's got to be done right. So that's what we do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's great. I appreciate your work. I mean, without doctors like you, there would be a lot of people that are out there in need, and it's awesome. And it's cool that somehow, I mean, in my tiny little part, I can contribute a little bit.
You're making a difference. You and everybody with you is making a difference. So
hey, thanks, Doc. I mean, what, synchronicities and consciousness and all the things that, we're all a part of. And I mean, that the minute I met you was amazing. For the people that are watching, it was, I'll give you the story. And I mean, obviously Ed Color, but, Jay Anderson for Project Unity, him and I were at Contact in the Desert in June, and he was nervous. He was super nervous because that day he had to speak on the experiencer panel. And he was like, "I don't know if I can do this." I'm like, "You're going to do it. You're going to do it." He woke up really early, went down, tried to get something to eat. And he's like, I'm backing out. I'm like, "Don't back out. I'm putting clothes on. I'm coming down." Like, I come down. Obviously it was amazing. He did a great talk, but I come down and he's sitting there with you and your wife. And I just sit down right between you. I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?" You guys are just talking, and we just sat there and chatted, and it was amazing. It was like old friends. And, obviously that's how I met you. And it was like, we were just talking about everything. And then finally, after like, I don't know how long we talked, you're like, "Oh yeah. I introduced yourself and what you do." And my mind like,
surprise.
Yeah. Like,
that was great.
What?
Yeah,
I thought you were just hanging out.
And here we are early in the morning, sitting in front of this lake and fire. There's sort of that earth, air, fire. It's and water all sort of in one place, which was it was just really kind of an awesome place to just sit there and hang out and talk. That was really cool.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was beautiful. I mean, and it was cool, just the conversations we had about everything, and then obviously we, made it to your talks and just hung out in the front row, and I'm probably whistled and yelled too loud a lot, but
that was great. Yeah, loved it. I needed all the applause I could get. And actually, the talks were fantastic. There had a lot you can imagine, a lot of great feedback. So,
oh my God, the talk that really blew my mind too was, I got it on DVD, believe it or not, and there's a skip in it. It makes me mad because it's the experiencer, the encounters in non-earthly consciousness.
Yeah, the workshop, is that
the workshop? From the workshop, because I got it, but it skips. But I mean, I was there, so I get the full view. But that was amazing, right? That workshop was nuts.
I didn't even know what to do. Like, a workshop, huh? What? You can't. You're talking about near-death experiences. Like, so there's this remarkable near-death experiencer, Sandy T, and I'd interacted with her, and we couldn't get the video working. But I said, well, people can ask questions. She can tell her story, and. That just I love doing that. I've never had a near-death experience, thank goodness, knock on wood. But we'll keep it that way. But I've known some amazing people that have had near-death experiences, and hers was among the most profound that I've ever heard, out of over 4,000 near-death experiences that I've explored. So she hit a home run. I mean, there was a group of people after that talk that went on for about another 45 minutes after my talk ended. I mean, people were just fascinated, and Sandy T really is that fascinating, getting into her multiple near-death experiences, her trip around the universe, her encounters with not alien life in our physical universe. It's part of her death experience, and just the insights she received about things was just absolutely mind-boggling. So that was a real home run on that workshop.
Oh my God, that's amazing. And even your talk, your lecture that you gave was awesome. Your slide deck, everything was like top notch. I loved it. It was just perfect. And it's just like when I got into the whole UFO thing, and I've spoken about this, and it's led me down the path to consciousness, and that's where I went. It went from these physical things that people are seeing in the sky to entities that people are interacting with at some point to down to now, like, well, the common denominator is consciousness. It's how the human interacts with the phenomenon, basically, and what it is. And the near-death experiences is exclusively via consciousness interacting with a phenomenon that's non-physical, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at.
You nailed it right there. So that's exactly what near-death experiences are, and absolutely why there's that overlap with UFOs, which so often is described as an interaction with in non-physical communication, or at least communication that's radically different from our usual earthly everyday communication. So, I couldn't agree more. I wish I had more time to study the UFOs, or we're going to call them that, or unidentified alien phenomena, UAP. I like everyone.
UFOs. We always still call them UFOs. Yeah, we know what they are, right?
Everyone's. Well, that's been my discussion about that for decades. But I wish I had more time to explore that. We do. In our website, nderf.org, we do get an occasional UFO experience. And wife Jody actually had a UFO experience with her and sister all at the same time. So that was one reason. I mean, having a UFO experience makes you fascinated, I think, for most people. So Jody actually got me interested in Contact in the Desert because she wanted to go there real bad, and I had to get invited. So I had to jump through some hoops, and ultimately was very honored with a fantastic Contact in the Desert meeting to get invited and go do a couple, really neat talks and hear a lot of other experiences. And of course, hanging out with folks like you was just awesome too, John. So that was just great. It's like you're right. It's like we were old friends, and here we are sitting here talking about consciousness, near-death experiences and related phenomena. It was like, geez, it's like we did this for the last 20 years.
That's amazing, isn't it? That really synchronicity part. I loved it, man. It was great. And then just like having that conversation with you, and then going to, your talks, it's just like mind-blowing when, from where, like you said, where it goes for me, starting out with the UFO thing. My backstory is I think we talked about this before, but my dad, when he was younger, saw a UFO and like completely, believe with multiple people, then saw another one again. So my entire life, I grew up thinking it's real. There's no reason to doubt my father. He's not going to lie to me that these UFOs are real. And then I've had my own experiences with multiple people and by myself. And it's like, well, like you said, once you had that experience, there's no going back. It's the same thing with a near-death experience. From everything that I've read from you and all your research, it profoundly changes your life. And those two things are completely connected with the phenomenon and consciousness. I think that, the near-death experience, it's just one of those things where you have your life's profoundly changes when you have a experience with UFO or the phenomenon. It's the same, and the tie is consciousness.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I grew up in a family that was very scientifically minded. My father was a professor, and we'd talk about his research at the dinner table. And we just like poo-pooed UFOs, but as I learned again, I'm driven by evidence as a physician, and what's real is, well documented, and certainly UFOs have that extreme clarity of documentation and remarkably consistent observations worldwide. And so I just, I get it. That's the evidence. So UFOs are a reality, and that's like, wow, now what can we learn about that? I actually got a lot more interested in UFOs after I started my near-death experiences. I mean, I immediately started thinking, I started thinking, okay, wow, and consciousness is sort of the common denominator. Right. It's like, what does this all mean now that we know unequivocally from near-death experiences that there's consciousness existing apart from the body? Often that early element called an out-of-body experience, unequivocally, that is a real consciousness that we all have, that is a part of our physical self that can separate when we're in a life-threatening crisis. And then that just opens up all things. I got interested in just out-of-body experiences, not associated with near-death experiences, but called after-death communication, and certainly very interested in UFOs. I guess, one reason I didn't explore UFOs as much as I would have over the last 25 years that I've been doing this is so many people have done so much good research and presentations on UFO. It seems to be something that, there really isn't a need for that kind of scholarly research or investigation or writing like there is for, certainly ongoing near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, etc.
I do think, but there's a definite intersect, and like you said, and I do believe now that, I mean, obviously since 2017, with the New York Times and this whole latest, where the government came out and said UFOs are real, and from that point now, scholarly, academic, they're not scoffed at, they're not ridiculed for research, and I'm sure you've probably faced some of that in your experience as well, just with the near-death experiences, right? I mean, you had to have faced some of that, right?
Yeah. That's a good question. In late August, we actually crossed the 25th year anniversary that my research website devoted to near-death experiences, the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, NDERF.org. So late August this year, 2023, we hit our 25th year anniversary. I will tell you, when I started my research website at the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, I was very concerned about the attitudes of other physicians and potentially even patients, and would that be a barrier to what I'm doing professionally? I'm a radiation oncology physician, and you really don't need to have barriers to referrals to me or way in performance of my professional duties, or what is the organizations that I'm affiliated with going to think too. So it's like, sheesh. So literally for about the first 8 to 10 years that I did my NDE research, if you went to that website, I was Dr. Jeff. That was it. There was no way I could be identified. So I literally worked anonymously. So you certainly, I wasn't out seeking glory in this research, doing it anonymously. So, and I was comfortable with that. And, a number of people were aware of me. This was back in an era where Art Bell was doing his thing. And I was, at that time, I was practicing in Las Vegas when I set up the research foundation. Art Bell's located in Pahrump, Nevada, relatively close. So I being on his show about every 3 months for several years. And that really resulted in a lot of awareness, but nobody professionally knew me. Now, the interesting thing is I had to stop being anonymous when my first book came out, Evidence of the Afterlife, the Science of Experiences. So I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how well received it was going to be. I should have. It was kind of naive. The debut was on the NBC Today show.
Yeah, then you're on Oprah, and then
so we have all that, and so all of a sudden it was on that, and then 8 days later it became a New York Times bestseller, and so it was very obvious very quickly to everybody that that, and of course then all sorts of media events hit, but I had to really come out, and then we had to change the website. Well, it's no longer Dr. Jeff, and it's now Jeffrey Long, MD. So that was the backstory as to how I suddenly went from working anonymously to not working anonymously. And actually, the book is so powerful, and the lines of evidence for the reality of near-death experience are so strong. I've really, wherever I work, once people knew what I was doing, there would be essentially nobody that would dare debate me or argue.
How could they?
You read the book, it's like, okay, argue with this. Where did I get it wrong? How? I've studied, out of thousands of NDEs. So, and subsequently, especially today, I'm happy to say, John, people are much more open, exactly like UFOs. Same thing with near-death experiences, and in fact, in 2021, a major survey done by the Pew Forum found remarkably 72% of American adults answered affirmatively to the belief that near-death experiences are observation of an essence departing the physical body. Notice they went out of the way not to use soul and keep it generic. But I mean,
yes, they did essence, but hey, it's the same. Yeah, but
essence,
definitely.
Yeah, I read that question and I went, oh, okay, they were struggling to avoid the word soul. But 72% of Americans, agreed that was reality. So, media events, just exactly like what we're doing, and over the past, like literally decades, have really helped people to understand the reality of near-death experiences. And we've seen the same thing in the medical community. And I think it's easier for doctors to understand the reality of near-death experiences because they're with very sick people, they're experiencing people that have died. I mean, I've done CPR for real a couple times, and we've really been right with people at that close brush with death, and even if we can't save them at that time of crossing over. So we get it, and we know when people are comatose, unconscious, that they can't have a lucid, organized experience at that time. So I think physicians, much more so than scientists, especially neuroscientists, have largely accepted the reality of near-death experiences just based on the realization that understanding real-world consciousness, and that's helped.
Yeah, and that always amazes me too. And this is said a lot, and obviously it's my daughter's 5, right? And I talk to her like an adult most of the time, and explain things to her. Obviously, not, but I said, it's consciousness. We were talking about something, it's just consciousness. And she said, well, what's consciousness?
That's good.
And I'm like, really struggling to explain, I've researched this for, the majority of my life, and really struggled to come up with a great way to explain consciousness to her. And then this is a problem worldwide. This is a big problem that's plagued mankind forever, because you can explain to somebody, and the way I did it was finally say, okay, when you're sleeping and you're not responding and things like that, that's unconscious. So conscious is the reverse of it. And that's the best thing I could come up with. I said, doctors are really good. People are really good at explaining when you're unconscious, when you're knocked out, when you're sleeping, you're not responding. But consciousness, it's kind of the opposite of that, but we're still trying to learn. And Doc, I don't know. I mean, that's, for me, it's hard. It's still hard, right? I mean, it's one of these things where how do you do that? How do you explain consciousness? How do you define consciousness?
That is just a huge scientific field of investigation. Hey, join the club. We all, about trying to explain consciousness or understand it. So, and it's hard enough, geez, just with physical brain consciousness. I mean,
right,
here we are, sensations, memories, our apparent free will, our apparent manifestation of consciousness, all from that perspective of who we are, filtering all our sensory input through that physical structure we have, the brain. They're making a lot of progress on that, but they really don't understand. They can't explain consciousness in terms of nerve function. They're getting better at it. They can explain deficits. Oh gosh, if you have a stroke or that cancer is a critical area of the brain, you can see what happens with focal brain dysfunction. But as far as that remarkable integrated process in the human brain, we're still struggling to understand it. And then, hey, here you and I come along, and we've got unearthly consciousness, non-physical consciousness, which further adds a layer of complexity to understanding consciousness. And it's we'll see. I don't know if they're ever going to work out all the physical brain function that allows us to reason, to have memory, to have sensory input, process it, emotions. Qualia is a term for it, but it's part of what's fascinating. That's it. I would say, John, don't you think that's literally, I think in science, one of the last of the great frontiers?
It's got to be. It has to be.
There's 2 great last frontiers in science: consciousness and the universe we live in, which and UFOs are certainly very important for both consciousness and for insights on that universe we live in. So it's kind of exciting to be at those 2 literal frontiers of science in this day and age.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's been both have been historically studied for as long as the written word, right? Yeah. Both, I mean, things in the sky. I mean, back then they call them UFOs, but apparitions, lights, angels, whatever you want to call them. All of these things have been interwoven with consciousness and dreams and dream states, and and everything we can possibly come up with. And I think that's the great. You're right. It's the great new frontier, right? And I think that it's amazing that now that the stigma has been lifted in a lot of regards. I mean, like you said, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you wouldn't put your name on it. I mean, there was the same thing with ufology. There was a lot of times where people we talked about this, where the van would show up and tell you to, knock it off, right? The Men in Black, that kind of thing was real. And, I was scared for a long time. I wasn't public either. I did my research on the side, and then finally, after it's on the front page of the New York Times, forget it. I'm just going to do it, and the same thing, for me. I mean, I'm sure there's people, I do, information security, but I'm sure there are people that say, oh, John's whatever. But, I've always been open. I'm honest. I'm, public. I'm hide anything ever. I'm just on the quest to learn what this is all about and experience life and figure out if I can make a tiny contribution and, help in any way. So sure. I appreciate the time. I mean, that's that we get to spend with each other. Speaking
exciting
about this.
times. Oh yeah. And the other nice thing about the government coming forward the way it did, now other governments are coming forward. It's far more about UFOs in the media now that they're, real. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, they were poo-pooed enough. So there's going to be, it's that sort of cascading things. You get more media awareness, more people bringing up UFO observations by multiple people, by radar, other sort of objective characterizations of a UFO. And that's really, like I say, this really exciting times as we have more people coming forward with their experiences, documenting them. And now all of a sudden, like you said, that's just really cool. People aren't poo-pooing them. People are saying, okay, wow, what more can we learn? Exciting and so neat.
Yeah, and it's amazing just through all my research and everything. Obviously, I've told you this, but congratulations on being the Bix runner-up for the Bigelow consciousness study. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove won, but he's a good guy.
Oh yeah, we love the guy. Yeah, I know him well. I'm going to run a little bit with what you just said there. For viewers. In 2021, a billionaire by name of Bigelow put a huge amount of prize money into a contest that had never happened in this world. It was a contest for the best scientific evidence of survival of consciousness. That was a term they use, but it's really like, if you will, life after death, as it's more widely known. Yeah. The prize money was so huge, and this was such a major contest that over 1,000 entries were given from literally all over the world, every corner of the globe. Right. And a very seasoned and carefully selected panel of 6 judges reviewed a little over 200 of these entries. And this was, selected out the winners of the contest. This panel of judges went through, allowed, if you will, the most detailed, rigorous, scholarly, scientific vetting, peer review that's possible. Right. Because there were so many people that had their essays in, and so many, people and judges were extremely selective in that, really looking for the best science. So. I just submitted my essay. It's 25,000 words too. I mean, geez, that's about half a book. So that took a lot of time to do, but it was a labor of love, and I figured I needed an update on my research. So went ahead and did that. Hats off to wife Jody Long, who helped out enormously, and so that helped too. By the way, she's a licensed attorney, but she devoted her full-time job now to the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, so I couldn't do it without her. Anyway, we went ahead and submitted the essay, and then this guy didn't hear anything. I was like, well, okay, whatever. I think I learned a lot. I learned something. Mainly what I submitted was largely my original research, so we were really pushing the boundary and understanding near-death experiences. And of course, it was an essay strictly involving near-death experiences. Well, anyway, so one day I'm sitting here going through my email, and I see in the subject line, "You won $50,000." So like everybody else, when you see a subject line like that, you take the mouse right. And I started bringing it over, delete, and then I hold it, wait a minute, and I just started reading the first few words, and I went, wait, what? And I didn't delete it. So thank God. How would you like to delete a $50,000 prize? So
the Nigerian prince.
Cautionary note to everybody: sometimes you be careful. So anyway, thank goodness I did not delete it and went ahead and said, "Holy crap, I'm in the runner-up group." And so, that led to me, having a big prize. And geez, you can almost see this. Yep, there it is up on the wall. Up there is barely see a plaque that says Jeffrey Long, winner, $50,000 for the runner-up group. So that was pretty awesome. We went to a big award ceremony, and I've been working with Robert Bigelow is his name ever since. But they had sort of the top 3, and then they had the runner-up group, and then they had the honorable mention. As long as you're talking about near-death experiences, that was the #1 topic that was in the essays that provided scientific evidence of life after death.
Wow.
So that's really, a big deal. And then there was a European group that reviewed all the essays that were winners, won money. And actually there were 29 in that first 3 runner-up group, and then there was a large honorable mention group. Right. And they went through all of those essays for the best scientific evidence from their perspective of showing survival of consciousness, life after death. And I was honored to be in the 6th that they picked out of that whole group as providing the best evidence of life after death. So that was further vetted by another very knowledgeable scholarly group. So it's been exciting to be carrying forward near-death experience research and and being able to bring that up to the world and share it with events like this. So it's pretty exciting. But even more convincing than ever, the reality of near-death experience and its consistent message of an afterlife, a wonderful afterlife for all of us, is certainly very exciting research. And consciousness, we don't really die, and we really, every single person that is viewing this was going to have their consciousness survive their bodily death. They'll be reunited with their deceased loved ones and be in a realm that is very obvious in my near-death experience research, in the afterlife realm, that is way, way more better in every way than our physical earthly life. So that's kind of exciting to be aware of that based on a mountain of evidence.
That's amazing. That is very awesome. And that's the biggest secret, can you hear me okay? I'm sorry if it.
Oh yeah, no, you're
okay.
in real good.
I was laughing so hard that I unplugged my microphone a minute ago.
But
so
that
sure.
$50,000 email was certainly a hoot. Yeah, that was good.
I could just imagine deleting it forever and just having it go away.
We can laugh about it now. But boy, right after I realized what I almost did, I was like, yeah, that was anxiety time. It was all good, and that was a lot.
Oh my God. Yeah. So that's amazing that's it. That I wasn't under the impression that near-death experiences was the majority of the submitted work. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And actually that European group that looked over all the 29 winning essays, 5 of the 6 that they selected were devoted to near-death experience. Wow. One was devoted to mediumship. But again, that's, with yet another vetting process, that really shows that really, in my opinion too, I've studied, many thousands of experiences other than near-death experiences.
Right.
And certainly from my point of view, near-death experiences are fulfilling that basic scientific principle that is, what's real is consistently observed. And there's just a profound depth of consistency in near-death experiences worldwide, across all age groups, across all pre-existing beliefs.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Doesn't make any difference, religious or atheist. I mean, even to this day, John, it amazes me to think that with regard to near-death experiences, it makes no difference whether you're, say, a Muslim in Egypt or a Hindu in India, a Christian in the United States, an atheist anywhere. Yeah. Wherever on the planet you have your near-death experience and whatever your prior belief was, the content of that near-death experience will be strikingly similar. So they're absolutely not substantially modified by pre-existing beliefs at all. I mean, it's literally an experience that could unify the world, and it's a common thread of what we experience across all boundaries and beliefs. It's literally, if we continue to have it known throughout the world, it's literally one of the better ways I can think of that could be sort of that foundation that could help unify the world in terms of a common experience. And may I add, John, I think UFOs are also another good one. People, I'm sure you've heard. Tell me a little bit, because you're the expert on UFOs, and I'm not. What is it like around the world, just for UFOs that you've run into?
Well, it's definitely the same type of experience where people, it's interesting to see it differentiate culturally. Some cultures experience it as that they're always there. Native American in America, for example, they call them the Sky Brothers. At some point they're just accustomed to them. Some other indigenous tribes, Brazil, other places, they're just aware of them. They're just there. In different parts of the world, they don't look at them as anything different or anything, as we do here in the Western world, at least in the US, is like, oh, wow, that's a machine in the sky, things like that. So it's interesting that there's a different relationship with the things that they witness in the sky and how they interact with them. But they all have the same experience, that they're there, they're real, they're not imaginary, and they're shared across, multiple people, times, locations, and every single time I think it has the same type of experience for people, where I think it awakens you probably subconsciously to the fact that there's way more going on all around us continually than our perceptions are able to comprehend or gather. We can only take in so much data. I think I've read a couple of times where your brain is basically just a filter. There's all this stuff coming at us, but we just filter out things, and we separate them into patterns and recognizable symbols, and we automatically put them into things that we can readily understand. It's interesting to see those little mind game tricks, the little visual things that you look at, like when you see those online or something like that, where it's like, okay, this is, this box is not moving, right? When there's a box moving around the thing, it's like your perception is that it's moving, right? And you see those things. So it's like, that's happening all around us all the time, but we're really not experiencing it. So when they have something that pops into your paradigm that's not there, you immediately try to associate it with something. And I think only now in the past, I don't know, since, media, we associate it with, okay, well, that's a UFO. Whereas ancient times, it was an alien, it was an angel or a messenger, or a sky brother, like the Native Americans and things like that. So it's interesting to see that correlation where it kind of just awakens the person to a different perception that they're used to. And I think to tie that in, I've met a lot of people that are experiencers, UFO experiencers, and there's been a striking number of them have actually had NDEs, and they didn't have any of the UFO experience until post NDE, where it basically did something to them where it switched on whatever that is, that perception that they never had before. They had the NDE, and then after that, they're lifelong experiencers. They can go outside and they'll know right away when there's going to be a craft coming, and they'll have entities come into their room, and they'll have that consciousness. They'll have downloads, and they'll have those conversations, back and forth, mentally, type of things that they never had before. And that really interests me. And I don't think that that's been a big part of anyone's research, maybe Bigelow, because like you said, Robert Bigelow was really into, NDEs, and he had all the contracts with the government. And he, like he said himself, he spent more money than anybody else ever to study UFOs. And he dropped it at one point. Right. And well, I don't know necessarily he dropped it, but his main focus now is on the, continuation of the soul, of the spirit of the human after death. Right. So it changed, consciousness. It changed from looking at these crafts, these physical things, reports, beings, metal samples, and that to, does your soul survive your body after death? So just looking at that, and then obviously him sponsoring research and getting into that, he must have found something, or he saw the connection, or based on all the evidence that he was accustomed to, right, or available to him, that this is a huge connection, right?
Right. That's a real good point, John. I mean, when he was very familiar with these 29 essays that were the best scientific evidence of survival of consciousness, of life after death, and so actually he heroically had those 29 essays bound in a hardback book, like gold trimming,
series of books, right?
And printed off, like scores and scores of them, so they're being given free to some major academic institutions and literally all around the country. So that's really helping to get the word out, not only from his essay work, and all the essays are posted online for free. By the way, they're free downloads, but also sharing the bound books of these essays worldwide is really exciting to get that word out in that very special way. So Robert Bigelow is certainly very interested in consciousness, and I continue to keep in touch with him and expect I will continue to do that. And so that's really, really fascinating. I mean, the guy's a visionary. I mean, he's been so interested in this for decades, and worked so much to help us all collectively understand that. It's really just amazing that he's got that visionary insight into consciousness, and helping to all of us to understand it in that very special way, like essay contests.
That's the best way to do it. I mean, you collect the brightest minds around the globe, and then give it up academically for research. Here you go. Here's the best research that's provable scientific research that you could possibly ascertain from the brightest minds on the planet. We're going to bound it. We're going to give it to you, and then expound your research. Where when you started this 25 years ago, that didn't exist. You found one article. I mean, I've read all your stuff, and I've, watched all your interviews, and obviously you were doing something else, and you found an article about, I can't remember the name of the article right now. It's escaping me, but you found an article and you were like, well, what is this? Right?
You nailed it there, John. I was actually in my residency training for radiation oncology. This was so long ago, so many decades ago. There was no internet. Over the hill here, age, but that was back when, if you wanted to get an article, instead of going to the internet, you had to go to the medical library and go to these huge, thick, bound volumes of the medical journal. So I was over there looking for a cancer article, flipping through the pages of actually the Journal of the American Medical Association, one of the world's most prestigious medical journals. And so looking through there, and completely by accident found an article that had in the title near-death experience. Dr. Sabom, cardiologist, published that. And I'd never heard of that. I mean, as a doctor, I thought, geez, you're either alive or dead. What's what's his near-death thing? That's
Yeah.
weird. So
Right.
fascinated. I sat here and read this thing, and it was just immediately fascinated. I mean, here was people that had cardiac arrest or heart stop, and yet their consciousness was over their body, and they were observing details in exquisite details while they were literally comatose, while people were trying to revive them, and they were real. They were validated as being real observations. So, I mean,
Right.
I knew immediately. I said, there's absolutely no way the physical brain can do that. That's impossible. I mean, you
Right.
can't
Right.
they can't have consciousness apart from the body while people are sitting here pumping on your chest and frantically trying to bring you back to life, consciousness over the body, and then from that vantage point, observing their own EKG machine, measure of heart electrical activity, what people are doing, what they're saying, who's coming in, who's going out, crash carts that don't magically appear, which is so common.
Right.
And I was just absolutely blown away. So my initial thought was, geez, why aren't more people doing research on this fascinating topic?
Right.
And I even stopped looking for that cancer-related article, looked up the very few references that were there in the early 1980s. So it was sort of pioneering work.
Right.
And said, if this is real, well, I remember vividly thinking, this changes my view of the universe. I mean, this is powerful evidence. So later on, I started up actually later on, about a year or two later, I had a college friend visiting me, and his wife had said, this is kind of interesting too, John. We were sitting
Yeah.
here, okay, the truth comes out. So don't anybody that's hearing this widely discuss this elsewhere, but this is what really happened.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
this expands on what's in my book. So we were sitting here. It was like a dang cold winter in Iowa, as they always are.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we're sitting here, the four of us, wife and friend, his wife, over a dinner table at a nice restaurant. And my friend's wife said that she had so many severe medical allergies that once she was under general anesthesia and she coded, her heart stopped.
Oh, wow.
But she said it in kind of a funny way, and my medical instinct was, I think there's more to this story, the way she said it and what's going on here. And then I was sitting here prepared to, I would love to have asked, what did you remember anything? But that's stupid, isn't it, John? I mean, her heart stops and you
Yeah.
don't have any conscious experience, and she's under general anesthesia.
Right.
So there's absolutely no way. And so I said, that could be, if I ask if she had an experience at that time, everybody else at this table will think that's the dumbest question I ever asked. So fortunately, we were having some beer. And so, okay, if people, that fortified my courage in the sense that if people poo-pooed me or ballyhooed what a stupid question that was, I could just blame it on the beer and move on here. So that was another way that beer, exactly. So I said, with a plan B, I
Yeah.
went and asked her and said, oh, did anything happen? So about 30 seconds later, when I had the plan B ready, I asked her, well, did anything happen when
Yeah.
you coded while you're under general anesthesia? And she said, why, yes. And went on to describe consciousness apart from the body, observing her own EKG machine. They monitor it carefully, making the racket that it does when it goes flat and there's no measurable heart activity. Tunnel, met deceased relatives in that unearthly, if you will, heavenly realm. And I'm just sitting here going, oh my God, but what? But your heart stopped. And we know that because you're right. That's a noise EKG machines make when it stopped. And you were under general anesthesia.
And that's documented. That's a medical documentation that her heart, I mean, that you could go look at the record, pull it up.
Pretty good documentation. So
Yeah.
she went on to describe vividly the first near-death experience I ever heard in person, but she didn't know what happened. And I said, well, I read about this a year or two ago. I think you had what's called a near-death experience.
Right.
And I sent some material that I was aware of, looked it up again, and I said, okay, wow, that's it. If this is consistently happening, there's something going on here about physical brain function is absolutely inexplainable by the physical brain. I mean, there's just no way what I just heard could have happened. So that was really a major impetus to getting the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation going, was to explore that and see if that was real. So now you know the truth. A nearby glass of beer was a important factor in my having the courage to hear that first in-person near-death experience, and then be left with such overwhelming wonderment that I spent a huge amount of time setting up that research website. So that's the real story.
Yes, we get the real story. And I'm a firm believer that you know, nothing happens, everything happens for a reason. It's not a coincidence. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a coincidence that you found the article. It's not a coincidence that you had
Yeah.
that dinner. It's not a coincidence that we bumped into each other. I don't know
Yeah,
what that's going to help
absolutely.
either one of us, but
No, I think so. Well, I mean, here we are having this conversation. You know, hope a lot of
right,
people are informed and inspired by what we're sharing here,
for
and
sure.
help them to learn about consciousness, and then have that message of profound hope from near-death experiences and actually from UFOs, that there's much more to consciousness than you would have learned in high school or college even, and that there's a whole universe out there of consciousness that's just waiting for all of us to learn more about it. So, you know, exciting times.
Definitely, definitely. One of the things that it always comes back to me, and I know we haven't spoken about this before, but you know, I'm a Freemason. I'm a member of the Rosicrucians, is a different society, and you know, some of these mystery schools, right? And
Yeah.
one of the things that keeps coming back to me is the connection between, you know, the secret societies, the occult kind of, and consciousness and UFOs. One of the big things within Freemasonry is, you know, the immortality of the soul, right? So that your soul doesn't die, you know, it continues on. And that connection to me has always been very interesting to see how those two things have been interrelated. It seems like maybe at some point in history, and I'm just speculating here, that maybe near-death experiences were documented and studied in, you know, type of invisible college type sort of way, you know, through the Rosicrucians, through other secret societies, and kind of changed as they learned and added that type of knowledge into the rituals and into the ceremonies and things like that as well. Because there's, you know, basically they some of the teachings, some of the degrees teach you that you know, there is more. You don't die. There is more to life. You know, you should do everything you can while you're here to make everything a better place for everybody. And no, you know, don't be afraid of death. Don't be afraid that when you die, you're just opening another chapter, and that you can never disappear. You know, and then obviously that's one of the main arching overtones from all the research that you've done, from all the essays or from all the questionnaires that you've gotten. I mean, I've written down that basically love is the biggest thing in the universe, and there's the oneness that everybody experiences. That's one of the one of the terms that comes up, and that that we're going to be okay, right? I mean,
oh, absolutely. I mean, remarkably consistently, people come back from a near-death experience with the understanding that love is the dominant force in the universe. Wow, that's reassuring. So in the afterlife, we're loved who we are, all that we are, everything that we are. And that's really exciting too. So, you know, that's neat that's, you know, we go into an afterlife that's filled with that much love. And in fact, as you said, that oneness, that connection, the unity of everything, that took me a long time with near-death experiences to go, well, I don't see that in my earthly life. I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense. How can we all be one and connected? But it was only after I saw that we're probably up to about hundreds, probably over 1,000 near-death experiences saying that. So again, what's real scientifically is consistently observed, and that overwhelming belief that, or understanding that there is that deeper oneness, unity, connection of all. And in fact, John, that's actually unity is a concept in the dictionary of love. So that would be sort of a super love that they have on the other side, is that unity or connection seems to be part of that unearthly, greater, you know, if you will, spiritual love that is all a part of us. In fact, I've asked a survey question very directly to near-death experiencers, last 834 I surveyed. During your near-death experience, did you come back with any understanding or concepts about love, or understanding or concepts about a mystical unity or oneness? And to my surprise, right about half of near-death experiencers said yes. And then the narrative responses are just, you know, overwhelmingly drive that home. So for the viewers, this isn't anecdotal. This isn't my subjective opinion. This is based on substantial data. By the way, we've posted the original narrative responses to both of those questions, hundreds and hundreds of them, up on the nderf.org website. So anybody on the planet can look at that original source of data that I look at and come to that same understanding. So that's really a deep reality of everything. That's interesting too. When people encounter UFOs, John, in your experience, do they come back with that sense about a unearthly, if you will, spiritual love or unity, oneness? Kind of hard to do that when you're seeing a UFO up there and it's you know, physically apart from you. But I'm just curious if any people that have UFO experiences come back, or even, you know, deeper contact with UFOs, have those same kind of concepts.
They do. There is a a lot of the reports that come back with the people that interact with either the beings or even the craft that have that sense of oneness of not separate, that everything is kind of the same, that basically what we speak about, it's just the overall fabric of the universe is everybody's twined. It's interesting to see how people try to there's been any cases of abductions, for example, that people have asked about God or Jesus and things like that, and they said, well, it's the same for we call it something different, right? It's the same. It's all the same, and I think they just have a hard time explaining the oneness, the unification of everything. So it's interesting to see that. It's really interesting to see how that some of them have the message or given messages of we're all one, we need to work together, where there's all this stuff that's going on, where they're trying to impart that wisdom upon the experiencer. It's interesting to hear the people that have actually had, like I said before, like had the near-death experience and then had an experience with a non-human entity, to see what that is, and that strongly suggests that there's a oneness, there's a kindness, that there's a mission that the person has to fulfill. And I think that's a lot of some of the research as well that people, they come back, right? So the near-death experiences, they're back, or we wouldn't know about it. But they have a mission to fulfill. They have like a purpose that they have to come back and fulfill. And I think a lot of the people that have these UFO abduction or related phenomenon have the same type of thing. But the majority of them, from at least my small studies, I've noticed that they've had the NDE. And then they've had these other experiences, or possibly afterwards they've had an experience at NDE, and it just strengthens that whole overall oneness, love concept for the whole thing. And it's interesting to see that there's a massive correlation. I'd be really wondered, interesting to see if all the data that you've collected, if through over the years, and all the if there's a correlation between that and any of the UFO activity or the alien or abduction, things like that. If any of that have happened post NDE, it'd be a really cool research.
It's fascinating. Just as we're sitting here talking, that's a vivid reminder to me that for the next version of the survey, we absolutely need to ask people that have had near-death experiences a very direct question. Have you encountered UFOs or unidentified aerial phenomena?
Right.
Compare and contrast. We did it before or after your near-death experience, or to get the timeline, have them describe that in detail, and then just have them compare and contrast that encounter with a non-earthly alien, if you will, compare that to your near-death experience. God, that would be an awesome survey question. Would be very important data. So I'm so glad we had to see. There you go. From this discussion, we're going to end up hopefully when we do the next version of the survey with the best of my knowledge, one of the first large-scale surveys of near-death experiencers about asking them in detail about their encounters with UFOs and some further details about that, and we can look directly at the similarities, differences. I share your belief, John. There's going to be a lot of fascinating overlap as we look into issues. In fact, we could design the survey so it just opens up a whole series of other questions, and get to the comparing consciousness, degree of consciousness during this, and what can we learn about that? I would say once we get that new survey up and that particular question or series of questions going, we're going to have a lot more understanding about the relationship between near-death experiences and UFO phenomena, especially with that interest in consciousness. So stay tuned. Details coming up in a few years. So.
That's awesome. No, that's really cool. That's I think that would be massive, just to tie that research together, just to see what that data presents itself as. And because like everything I've, anecdotal from what I've learned just from my research and speaking to people that have actually had these experiences. And, it'd be great to put that together just to see where that ties in. And I got to personally believe that it does. It's consciousness is the key. It ties into everything that we're talking about. It'd be really cool to see that, and I'm sure Bigelow would be interested.
Yeah, you know what? Yes, he would be. For the viewers, Robert Bigelow has been very interested in UFOs literally for decades, and has a lot of interesting explorations that he's done, and encouragement of others. So that's exciting. One of the things I would say with a near certainty, is that people that have had either near-death experiences or UFO experiences, I think among other change that they have after that, it opens them up to the fact that, hey, I can have experiences of basically unearthly reality. I mean, it opens up to the reality of UFOs, the reality of near-death experiences. So I would be very suspicious. There's a little bit of cross back and forth there. People that have had UFOs are going to be more likely, if they have a near-death experience, to share it, embrace that this is real. Like, oh, here we go again. I had that UFO experience. I had that awareness of altered consciousness and some sort of awareness of some of the greater, if you will, the bigger questions in the universe and some answers. And so I think that maybe people having UFOs may be more open to having near-death experiences and sharing it. People with near-death experiences may be more open to, probably are, more open to sharing their UFO experiences instead of poo-pooing them. So that's really fascinating. People can learn by them, from their own personal experiences. And gosh, we'll ask the survey questions and share it with us and the world.
Awesome. That's very cool. Well, cool. We did something today, right?
Yeah, geez, boy, wait, there we go. From my next contact in the desert, wish I had time to get that up. It takes a few years to get that many near-death experiences, like hundreds and hundreds, to really get the data. But shoot, stay tuned. Contact in the desert. We'll hope that we can have that real important insights from that someday. We can, along with what are my research and near-death experiences. So wow.
Yeah, I'll definitely help in any way I can. That'd be great. I'd love to help that. Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Just to try, because I could bring the people from the UFO side that I'm aware of and reach out and see if there's people there that that have had those too, and funnel them in and try to get that narrowed down. That would be amazing. That would be
really, yeah. You know what? Geez, you could jumpstart this by contacting people through the UFO organizations to say, hey, has anyone had a near-death experience? If you're interested, here's a form. You could go to the near-death experience websites and say, hey, is anybody research interest in people that have had UFOs, and just sort of cross over quickly. So dang, we're getting all sorts of good ideas here. And that would be fascinating. Yeah. So
there was a reason.
There lots of, cool. Very good.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the questions I had for you was that I asked a friend and said, hey, do you got a question? And his question was, let's see here. Is there a case where an NDE has crossed over into their life, not just in thought, but later life experiences or physical reality? So is there an NDE that's crossed over into like the real life, not just in thought, but like later life experiences or physical reality? Has something happened in an NDE where later on has happened in their life, where they've seen something, or, in their NDE that's later came true, or physically, or things like that? I think that's what he's asking.
So if the question is someone see anything during their near-death experience and become aware of future events, particularly in their own life or more globally in the lives of other people? So
I think so.
That's a fascinating question. It's fascinated me too. So not surprisingly, I have a survey question for people that had near-death experiences. Well, I've analyzed 834 near-death experiences. When I asked directly, did you become aware of future events?
Right.
And in your own life or in others. And so we have that, and we have the narrative responses, a relative, I don't know, small, maybe circa, if I recall, around 20%-ish of people said yes, and then they shared narrative responses. In looking over the narrative responses, I can't really see a pattern. Right. I can't really see any consistent awareness of when they describe future events that came true. It's kind of, it is really strikingly evidential. In other words, they may be things that are fairly common, but not anything that you could really hang your hat on. The one notable exception to that is fairly consistently in near-death experiences, during their NDE, they become aware of the future children. And we have a series of near-death experiences where they're aware that they're going to have a certain number of children, and who's male and female. And invariably, when that's described, this is like freaks them out. They're often like kids or early teens, and it's like, what the heck? But invariably, when they get that information, they later find that's exactly what happens. They have exactly that number of children, exactly that many males and females. So, again, that's a retrospective study. It'd be fascinating to look at that prospectively, really fascinating. It's very uncommon that people encounter that level of information during their near-death experiences. But when they do, and especially when it involves future children, that seems to be always accurate, which is really fascinating to me. But as far as something that you could apply to global understanding, anything about apocalyptic future events, what's that going to be like? I would have to say, out of hundreds and hundreds of narrative responses, I just don't have, I'd have to say they really don't seem to be, as a group, aware of future events, as best I can tell. That's how you globally look at that. And maybe that's not surprising. Another
Right.
concept in near-death experiences is free will. We have the choices in our earthly life to make those decisions. That affects us, our environment, and literally the whole world. And so maybe that's a not surprising if you believe that we have free will, we can change things. And certainly, all the evidence I've seen in near-death experiences, the future is not fixed. There's no fate. In other words, we're simply going to ultimately have that fateful outcome regardless. So that's really both, it's intriguing that there's no consistent observation of future events. Doesn't seem to be possible in near-death experiences, and yet reassuring in a way too, that we all have that, it's responsible, gives us all that responsibility to choose wisely, because we do literally affect not only our own lives, but other people around us and the world as a whole by the choices we make.
That is really reassuring. And it's really interesting to hear about children. I think I've heard you mention before where people in their NDEs, say they have to go back because they have to be there for their children. Their children would suffer detrimentally if you didn't return back to the real world. And so it's interesting to see where children, play a part. There's their DNA part of that, as well. Is DNA tied to any of this? Is DNA, that's one of my latest, dabbles have been looking into how DNA and consciousness could be intertwined or connected in some way. And it's interesting that you say that, because my mind started racing where, is that part of your consciousness? Is DNA you're having 4 boys now? When you're 17, you find out you're gonna have 4 boys, and does your DNA, is there part of your consciousness that has survived in DNA or transferred via DNA or moved along? I mean, it's one of those things where I'm trying to look into as well, and I'm sure there's a bevy of research that I haven't dipped my toes into yet, but I'm sure it might be there.
It's fascinating, and that would be fascinating research about DNA and consciousness in the bigger picture. There's not much that I can recall information about that in near-death experiences. So that doesn't mean it's not there. It just means it's not disclosed during a near-death experience. By the way, you did make another interesting point, people choosing to return for their children.
Right.
At the end of a near-death experience, the substantial majority of people simply are returned to their body to recover from that close brush with death involuntarily. There's no discussion. A distinct minority, however, of near-death experiences have a discussion, interaction, typically with other spiritual beings that are with them, about a choice to either stay in that unearthly, or if you will, heavenly realm, or go back to their body. Amazingly to me, even though these people having near-death experiences, they've lived decades of their earthly life, all their friends, family, loved ones, everything that they knew up until their near-death experience is their physical earthly life. And yet, when given a choice, the great majority of people having a near-death experience do not want to leave that unearthly heavenly realm. They have that profound sense of peace and love, among the 2 most common words used to describe a near-death experience, a sense of love, positive emotions beyond anything they knew on earth. They often, they may be interacting with their deceased loved ones. Near-death experiencers often say this unearthly heavenly realm they profoundly feel is their real home and not their earthly home. And so, remarkably, they really, at least initially, do not want to return to their physical body with a choice. And there's often some fascinating discussion, debate, and frankly, some arguments by the near-death experiencers, not so much the spiritual beings. But ultimately, when they do choose to return, and obviously they do ultimately make that choice, but when they do choose to return, it is the most common reason is relationships. And the number one relationship that leads them to decide to return is their children, or that concept that they have more to do in their life, that their work is not done yet. In fact, about 10 to 12% of near-death experiencers are near the end of the near-death experience have that awareness. They're being told by that external spiritual being, your work is not done, you have more to do, or language like that. So it's about 10 to 12% of all near-death experiences. We even had a person go over way over 1,000 near-death experiences. That transcends culture, no matter where on the planet, what language they shared their near-death experience with us. It's 10 to 12% of people have that awareness. There's more to do. Again, back to that significance and meaning of our earthly life, It makes near-death experiencers kind of nuts sometimes that they're not given specific directions. Go to this vocation, go to this relationship, but they're not. Almost never do they have specific information guiding them in terms of what to do. They're just simply told you have more work to do, there's more for you to do, without any specific direction. But again, we're back to that free will concept, deeply ingrained apparently in the universe. Again, I might add, a very significant part of love, and we see that over and over with that in near-death experiences. People are here, that life's meaningful and significant and purposeful, but from the other side, it's rare, quite rare, that you're given specific direction in terms of specific things to do.
That's amazing. Nobody likes to be told what to do anyway. So, I mean,
but yeah. And I think I understand that. Although near-death experiencers, I mean, they come back, wow, I came back from this unearthly heavenly realm.
Now what?
Now what? This is really important. I was told that my work's not done. What? Huh? Hey, what do you mean it's not done? What am I, what choice? What if I make a wrong choice? And yet, I think as long as people make their subsequent life choices out of that, what they've learned, hopefully during the near-death experience, the importance of love, compassion with others, there's no wrong choice. I mean, they're just simply going down that right path with those values they learned during the near-death experience.
Yeah, totally. That's amazing. I had one more question, if you don't mind. One of them was, when people, I know that obviously from sitting into the workshop, but people having experiences during their near-death experience with non-human entities. So aliens, I guess we can call them, or angels, or whatever demons, perhaps, whatever you'd like to call them. I mean, does that have a significant thread, or is that scattered through the research as well? Is there any major differences between those two types of NDEs? Is the people that have the, I saw grandma, or I saw a 7-foot tall gray alien, like this,
right?
Like,
okay.
Is there from your research, is that common? Or, I mean, if you can tell me any more about that, it would be amazing.
Yep, gotcha. There's basically two different ways to go after that question. One are beings encountered in that unearthly, or if you will, heavenly realm. These are almost always very kind, benevolent beings, extremely wise, loving. They feel overwhelming sense of love and compassion from those other conscious entities in the afterlife realm. And the so-called hellish near-death experiences are extremely rare. In fact, one major research article I co-authored came out and felt that these were so rare that that you have to really question, do these really exist in near-death experiences? I think they do exist, but I think they're extremely rare.
Right.
But in general, you have these conscious entities, and it's usually they look anthropomorphic. Much less likely they can be, light, unformed, or it's very uncommon that they can look like an alien, although that's been described. So the conscious entities in this unearthly or heavenly realm can take on a variety of forms. And in fact, we have a small series of near-death experiences where the person having the experience is given the choice. In other words, they're asked, how should I appear to you? What do you choose for me to be? So I think and that's really fascinating too, to think about. So in the unearthly heavenly realm, generally very positive, deceased loved ones. By the way, deceased pets are there too.
Right.
Many accounts of deceased dogs, cats, birds, horses, you name it. I've seen it all. Joyous reunions again, a lot of interaction and really profoundly positive information there. So in the afterlife realm, it seems to be that type of positivity. Very, I would say, extremely rarely you encounter, as you have a near-death experience, you seem to be traveling through the physical universe, and they describe, whipping past galaxies, other stars, in a way that would be implying it's not that unearthly, non-physical realm of the afterlife. This is part of the physical universe we live in. And I'm glad you got a DVD of the workshop I was in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that nailed it. We have exactly two people that had very detailed encounters with what is non-earthly alien physical life. And I'm fascinated by one of them, Sandy T, who was talking with me at that conference and she talked about her first place she visited was a world that was entirely water, and we now know from thinking about scientifically what other planets would be like, it's entirely plausible that they'd be water only. So she encountered intelligent life interacting there. She encountered other life. Again, nothing, and none of these beings that she encountered were anywhere near anthropomorphic.
Right.
Like water. Well, I mean, heck, you can't, this wouldn't work well. You and I, John, be swimming around the ocean all day. So they had obviously the adaptations for what you'd expect with life in an ocean variably described. And another person that I presented near-death experience encountered a less developed alien life and sort of like caveman-like things going on a hunt, and then a more developed life where people kind of said, geez, what are you doing here? Interestingly, in the encounters with a more advanced life, they were interacting with the people there, and the unearthly, the much more advanced beings than those of us here on Earth were talking with the near-death experience, well, communicating. Communication was telepathic. Right. And they were startled, these beings on the other more advanced planets, that people here on Earth killed and ate living things for their sustenance. And these beings on the other planets sort of absorbed that energy in from their sun that they had or from other sources, and were literally grossed out. Appalled is the word they used, by the fact that we had to kill living things for us to survive, and that was very difficult for them. So again, a real window into what seems to be that unearthly alien life in the physical universe, and these extremely rare near-death experiences that had that type of experience.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Doc, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Hey, John, this has been such a pleasure. I loved it. So hope to see you again at some future time. You're going to go to the next contact in the desert? I hope so.
Well, yeah. And then eventually, I'll present with you.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, we'll have to, we would jump on that. Would be good. We're going to learn more about near-death experiences and UFOs. Damn, would we be awesome or what? Now, I'll humility aside, we could really rock that crowd. But hey, John, this has been such a pleasure. Great questions, great discussion here. This is fantastic.
Let's do it again sometime. This is great.
We love this. Great chemistry. Hey, and to all the viewers, I hope you found this profoundly informative and inspirational in so many ways, and certainly appreciate everyone tuning in and watching.
And make sure you check out nderf.org. I'll put all the information in the description and the title and everything, and I'll post it all.
Great.
I appreciate it so much, Jeff. Thank you so much.
This has been a blast. You have a great one. Take care, John. Have a good one. Bye-bye.